My Hero Academia is an anime that's beloved by fans. It's an anime that inspires and motivates its viewers to go beyond, but its core political message is filled to the brim with Copaganda, and its later attempts to flesh out its villains falls flat.
壊すだけだ。
次はお前の番だ。頑張ろうな、年寄り。
Copaganda in anime isn't a new phenomenon, but most of these animes critique the police and the systems of justice by delving into the grey, as they challenge the typical conservative black and white, good versus evil, order versus chaos, perspectives on crime. The grey, the nuance, the complexity of crime simply doesn't exist in My Hero Academia. They're simply good and evil, heroes versus villains. Before any of you jump me for calling your favorite anime a piece of Copaganda, I'm asking you to just let me explain how the hero system functions as a tool of repression. My fancy pants source for this first part will stem from George L. Jackson's Blood in My Eye. Once that foundation is set, I'll finally be able to explain why Stain was right, but also why My Hero Academia's villains kind of just suck. In the final part, I want to entertain an alternative. What My Hero Academia could have been. A lost future. Before we jump into it, make sure you subscribe and leave a beautiful comment on your thoughts on My Hero Academia or Copaganda and anime in general. We begin with a line.
This is a line, a thin blue line. But what is a thin blue line?
For a good chunk of the series run, Kohei Horikoshi demonstrates little sympathy for villains, and rather runs with the initial role of heroes in society, which is to curb chaos by enforcing order. The hero system is first introduced in the first episode, where the fanboy Midoriya observes a bunch of heroes fighting and stomping a monstrous, rampaging villain. There is no depth here. The villain is simply evil because he's injecting chaos into a civil, orderly society, and thus he must be repressed with force, with a thin, blue line. For the first bit of My Hero Academia, viewers must sit and watch Deku fanboy over heroes who repress villains like cops. His admiration for these cops spurs on his dream to become the number one hero. I have to admit, when I first watched My Hero Academia, it was inspirational. You have a main character who's quirkless and weak and a crybaby, yet he pushes on to save his friend. And the training he goes through, right? It's motivational. However, the early message of My Hero Academia, the foundation and the reasoning for why hero system must exist, why heroes must enforce and repress villains, carries on, and it's brought back in the final chapters. Although Horikoshi midway through injects some complexities into his villains, and has Midoriya skew away from All Might's teachings, it all falls short because of the thin, blue line. Horikoshi midway through must have realized that for a good chunk of his manga, it was too black and white and simple, but since he started the manga with the introduction of a thin, blue line, he couldn't change the course of My Hero Academia or critique the system. What am I even talking about? The The justification for the existence of heroes in society is that without these enforcers of the law, society would fall into utter chaos. All Might in the second episode introduces his philosophy that there needs to be a symbol of peace to deter villains from causing chaos, and he pulls a random ass crime statistic right out of his ass. All Might is basically the embodiment of the American justice system, as whenever he actually confronts villains who have legitimate concerns about the system, he just calls them all crazy. They're just a bunch of children, a bunch of terrorists. Thus, Hirokoshi continues to thread a narrative based off a thin, blue line, stressing that with a weakening symbol of peace, Midoriya is next. Deku, this little child, must carry the burden of becoming the next symbol of peace, who must reassert order to a chaotic world by defeating the big bad one for all. And he never questions things for a large chunk of the series. He just rolls with All Might's philosophy, and this is mostly because Deku grew up literally worshipping All Might like God. I bet Midoriya prayed at All Might's statue every single day. Although there are glimpses of the gray, the main antagonist, One for All, stresses the series' binary take on justice. One for All is comically evil. He is referred to as the Demon Lord, he steals other people's quirks because he wants to be the ruler of a chaotic world?
Nonsense!
See, the system isn't the problem. No, it's just this one evil dude, and once Midoriya takes him out, the world is saved. Justice prevailed. Faith in heroes will be restored.
I had a goddamn plan!
My largest grip with My Hero Academia is that it totally erases the suffering of the victims of the justice system. Villains are just tossed into Tartarus, which is this liberal, bullshit, cleaned up depiction of prisons. My Hero Academia whitewashes the violence of the police. It erases the torture prisoners go through. It paints this utopian image of fighting crime. Unlike George Jackson's book, Blood in My Eye, it never questions the repression of the oppressed. It never questions the system. Blood in My Eye is more than just a prison book. It's a book about revolution and fighting a fascist police state. It shows its readers how the American justice system is used to repress those who challenge the state. It goes into torture, into psychology, and into the brutal violence police inflict on victims of the justice system. My Hero Academia erases these realities. It shows glimpses of KKK-like racist citizens who hunt down people who have inhuman quirks. But do the heroes ever sweep in there and protect them from the KKK-like mob? We don't know. The resistance against this racism and discrimination is further condemned by the hero students. The lead figure in this uprising, Spinner, is further undermined by becoming a blabbering monster who must be repressed by the hero cop students.
Do you have a plan here? Because if not, I won't let this stand. Spinner, you're about to set us back 30 years. Shut up. Seriously?
Then you have the lead cop, All Might. And the thing about All Might is that he's just so fucking clean. Hirokoshi purposely writes All Might like a god who saves people with a smile while covering up his American philosophy on fighting crime. The author covers up and disregards moments where All Might have been pushed to his limits and executed a villain in pure rage. The symbol of peace can also be tied to how white Americans view the police, or if you're a person from the global south who has been bombed by the USA, you might link this symbol of peace to American geopolitical rhetoric. America after 9/11 touted itself as the world's police and promised peace by bombing every single country in the Middle East. All Might, and later the American hero, Star, can be read as stand-ins for both. For my analysis, My Hero Academia has almost a hidden Copaganda to it. One can read it as a story about a boy who wants to become the #1 hero, but underneath that innocent story, there's a story that pushes its readers to not question heroes or authority. You just gotta trust that the heroes will change things from the top. Due to this top-down structure, the system never goes through any radical changes. Sure, My Hero Academia has a few people who challenge the system, but their message is undermined with mental illness. To understand what I mean, let's take a look at the villains in the margins. There are a lot of villains in anime, in comics, and superhero shows. The very best villains are either people who challenge something with an ideology or a belief. This could be the world, the systems that govern a world, or the main character, like Blackbeard. Then you have the twisted fascist fucks, who have control over the system and mirror the fascists who rule our world. Villains like Ikiri Gendo, Akainu, the Five Elders, Wrath from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, the Cibula System, Eren Yeager, in Space Hitler, Frieza. There's a third category, which will be explained later. I'm not going to throw shade on My Hero Academia's villains. When watching and reading My Hero Academia, this series is strongest when villains take control of the narrative, and we only get a backstory for 4 of them.
Nonsense!
The thing that initially shakes the hero society is the spread of Stain's ideology. Although Stain is portrayed as this deranged hero killer, he follows the villain's logic that was brought up in the 13th episode of the first season. That many heroes are fakes. That many became heroes for fame and glory. And interestingly, the only hero Stain really respects is All Might. Stain, however, doesn't really attack the system, and rather goes after individual heroes. But Stain still does impact the system, as his ideology spreads and impacts other villains, like Dabby, Twice, and Spinner. Stain, to a degree, also influences Midoriya, as Stain confuses him by saving his ass. But the consistency of complex villains fluctuates in My Hero Academia. In the camping arc, for an example, Midoriya faces a mad, muscular villain who is just hell-bent on killing and fighting. Yet, the villains fluctuate back into the realm of complexity, as my favorite villain, Twice, is a person who is suffering from a mental illness and joins the League because he couldn't fit into normal society. The same can be said about My Hero Academia's trans character, Magne.
友達と会ってきた。内気で恥ずかしがり屋だけど、私の素性を知ってもなお友達でいてくれた子。彼女言ってたわ。常識という鎖に繋がれた人が繋がれてない人を笑ってる。ケンちゃんはその常識から飛び出したんだよね。私は飛び出す勇気も持てないや。何にも縛られずに生きたくてここにいる。
Or Spinner, a person who became a shut-in because of KKK-like violence. Or even Dabby. Dabby grew up in a eugenics, abusive cop household. What drove these villains to join the League was not evil, but a society and a system that favors good, useful quirks. These so-called villains are victims. They are people who are in the margins, who exist in a society that refuses to change or better itself. Even if they do not resist, the heroes and society at large will deem them as freaks, as deviants, as people who don't deserve to exist in society, or the citizens will straight up kill them like the KKK. So the only option they have is to resist. As George L. Jackson writes,
"People who refuse to stop fighting can never be repressed. They either win or they die, which is more attractive than losing and dying."
in a good story, the League of Villains could have liberated society by winning over the oppressed masses and waging a revolution. But My Hero Academia isn't interested in change because its villains are dead set on destruction. When I was watching this soul-sucking anime, I kept asking myself, what do the villains want? Do they want to change society? Do they want to help the victims of the system? Nah. They simply want to destroy. The destruction of an oppressed system is good, but the author doesn't provide the next step. And I don't have concrete facts, but if you read My Hero Academia, you'll find that the author purposely undermines the villains so that the heroes shine. Or Hirokoshi did have something more in mind, where the heroes are actually challenged and must come to terms that the system is trash, but the mangaka simply ran out of time and had to wrap the story up. Wrapping a story is a tough thing to do, but My Hero Academia seems super rushed, and it simply comes down to one villain who wants to destroy the world versus the heroes who want to, save the world. The complexities are erased, and it circles back to the premise in episode 1 that villains are these evil dudes who are just hell-bent on destruction and causing trouble, and the heroes, the good guys, gotta just save the world so that things return back to normal. Small spoilers for the final chapters here. Midoriya in the end has to come face to face with what went down. He has to come to some sort of an understanding of why the world was almost destroyed. And so he turns and asks his mentor and the police chief for answers. The solution to crime Hirokoshi offers is to pump out and create more heroes. I don't want to bash Hirokoshi. Not all mangakas read theory or history when creating their manga, but the creator of My Hero Academia is pulling references from American history. The heteromorphs get a small arc sandwiched in the final battle, and their persecution to a lot of black readers was instantly linked to the KKK and uprisings in response to police violence and brutality. The narrative the USA often spins when any black person is murdered by the police is that the police were just threatened. The rage, the anger, the uprisings, the revolts that come after every single time a black person is executed are then framed as destructive. This is why George Jackson is my primary source for this video, because Jackson in 1971, before he was assassinated in prison, understood that America and the American justice system are the enemies of black people in the USA. What he called for was revolution and liberation, not foolish destruction. Jackson does call for the destruction of the system because reform is not enough. Further, the heteromorph arc spits on the face of black readers who have felt pain and fear after years of continued terror. It's like Hirokoshi is telling black people right after the murder of George Floyd to just calm down. That violent uprisings are never the answer because they'll just set an oppressed people's rights back 15 years. Those affected should just shut up and let the cops inside the system fix things. In the anime, there are brief moments of complexity. Like when Midoriya stops the gentle criminal instead of beating the shit out of him like All Might would've. He comes to understand that Gentle became a criminal or a villain because he couldn't get hired for a job. It was economics and alienation that drove Gentle to become a villain. Or let's bring back my favorite villain, Twice. Twice suffers from a mental illness where, due to his quirk of doubling himself, he couldn't tell if he was real or the original. Due to suffering from having multiple personalities, or suffering from not being able to comprehend if he was the original or real, Twice couldn't fit into normal society, and thus he joined the League because they accepted him. The key thing that is driving people to commit crimes in My Hero Academia are systemic issues. Now, how do we fix these things? Shouldn't the heroes at the end realize that the system that they are protecting, the system that they are trying to maintain, is fucked up, and there are tons of victims out there who are suffering? Shouldn't society veer away from pumping and training heroes and maybe invest all that money into helping people who suffer from their quirks? According to the creator, no dude, you just gotta create more heroes who will swoop down and help people, and society will naturally return back to the mythic, peaceful, orderly utopia. It's pure and simple Copaganda. But it's a Copaganda that's brushed over with an inspirational story of a kid who wants to become the #1 hero by defeating the evil demon lord villain. But you know what? I think I can fix this. Let me just go watch 3 seasons of Psycho Pass, and I can show you the lost futures of My Hero Academia. If there's one anime out there that counters My Hero Academia's Copaganda and actually challenges the institution of the police, their role in society, and the systems of surveillance that are always at work in the background, it's gotta be Psycho Pass. Psycho Pass is an anime that initially seems like it's based off a far-off dystopian future where Japan is governed by an AI system, the Sibylla system.
私たちの社会は人の心理や精神状態の計測に成功した。魂の数値、サイコパスに基づき、人々は罪を犯す前に裁かれる。審判を下すのは、厚生省の巨大な監視ネットワーク、シビラシステム。
But the creator of Psycho Pass draws their theory from real-life practices of modern-day surveillance. They draw from Foucault and Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon.
あいつはマックス・ウェーバーを持ち出された次の瞬間にはフーコーやジェレミー・ベンサムの言葉を引用して返すでしょう。
システムというよりは巨大な監獄では。パノプティコン、一望監視施設の最悪の発展系。最小の人数で最大の囚人をコントロールする。
They draw from the war on terror with latent criminals who the police are tasked with enforcing a preemptive justice.
これって
シビラシステムのご託戦だ。大倉信はもうこの世にいらない人間なんだとさ。
そんな、ただ街頭スキャナーに検知されただけなのに。
Finally, the creators draw from America's, Japan's, the EU, and Canada's continuous usage of surveillance to keep an eye on migrants. In fact, watching this anime and how it presents state surveillance gave me horrid flashbacks to an essay I wrote back in Masters on Canada's history with surveillance. In the essay I called The Eye of Canada, I traced things back to the Indian Act of 1876 to how Canada evolved its surveillance after 9/11. If there's one essay out there that made me so paranoid of my existence, it's this one. Researching surveillance was like reading horror. I had to read the testimonies of the victims of surveillance, Muslim and Christian Arabs being held up, boxed into states of exception where their human rights were stripped, where they were questioned over and over and over. Innocent Muslim men locked in prison. How Muslim communities in Canada were bought and participated in spying on other Muslims. My research also links to many black scholars who have written about the surveillance system implemented in the USA that watches black people with a torturous gaze. I had to read a ton of books for this essay, but the one that really stood out was Simone Brown's Black Matters on surveillance and blackness. Today, the Five Eyes continue to spy on Muslims, South Asians, and black people's activities by tracing factors of risk, by tracing deviance from set norms of whiteness. One thing I discovered when researching for the Eye of Canada that sadly fell out of scope was how both the USA and the UK created an algorithm to measure threat levels of migrants who fled war. A system that eerily resembles the Sibylla system, but scholars tend to refer to it as a security assemblage. Sanjay Sharma and Jasbinder Najjar get into how the NSA and other national security apparatuses data mine normal, mundane activities and assemble it into an algorithm. The algorithm has been proven to then racially profile targets, where it marks them as deviant, outliers, risks, and others them. Currently, the UK is using this algorithm to enforce its oppressive, racist immigration policies, where they either cuff migrants that the system flags as a risk. These cuffs are tied to a system that monitors every action, every move, and every word, or the algorithm signals the government that the best decision to make is to mass deport migrants. Thus, the UK is currently enacting a plan to simply ship migrants away to Africa, just like Nazi Germany did. Although it might seem like I'm saying the algorithm is what dictates a government's decision and policies, that's not the case. The algorithm itself was built by racist fascists, and their policies, their rhetoric, their continued spread of a politics of fear, a politics of insecurity, a politics that marks migrants as threats to white Western society is what motivates fascist Nazis to take to the streets and partake in terrorism and the forced deportation of people who don't fit the norm of whiteness.
A range of people took part in the disorder, from children to long-term far-right activists. One of those present in Southport was a convicted terrorist, neo-Nazi Matthew Hankinson, using the mayhem to promote a race war. A former head of counter-terror policing says some violence has crossed the threshold into terrorism.
We have seen serious acts of violence designed to cause terror to a section of our community which have crossed the line into terrorism, and I hope my successors are looking at that very closely.
The targeting of hotels believed to be housing migrants comes after years of demonisation by the far right, with lists of hotels shared on social media, making it hard to know where might be struck next. On X, far-right convicted criminal Stephen Yaxley Lennon, also known as Toby Robertson, spent the weekend inciting his thousands of followers, all from the safety of a sun lounger in Cyprus.
Psychopath thus thrusts its viewers into a world that's already shaping. One that many people living in the Imperial core are utterly unaware of, or dismissive of simply because it doesn't affect them. It's an anime that may be challenging to watch because the system is continuously critiqued and it calls for the destruction of the system, not for reform. The anime perfectly illustrates how the police derive their justice and actions from racist systems, how the police are tools of the state, how many officers refuse to question why a certain individual or a group of individuals are marked as threats to a state. My Hero Academia's biggest flaw is the lack of focus on the system that motivates and educates heroes. Psycho Pass's primary focus, on the other hand, is on the Sibylla system and how it affects its victims who do not fit into the system's norm, or its targets are people who are initially clear and deviated from its algorithm. The system also targets and considers cops and academics who question the system as latent criminals, as people who may threaten the system and the norms of the society it governs. While the system promotes cops, academics, and journalists who worship the system like it's an omnipotent god.
ここから先へは進みません。秘密は守ります。いえ、全部忘れます。何も知りません。私、シビラを信じます。私、この社会が大好きですから。
Although I'm singing praises about Psycho Pass, it's far from perfect. First of all, it's way too woke. Look at the empathy and the compassion it shows to criminals. Look at these migrants coming to Japan. Look at the scene where they explain the 2008 financial crisis.
そしてバブルは崩壊した。
こうして何百万人もが貯金も家も仕事も失い、世界経済は大打撃を受けた。
Nah, I'm kidding. That's when Psycho Pass is at its strongest. Let's talk about the flaws of Psycho Pass. Since the creator of Psycho Pass created the anime in the format of Sherlock Holmes and Death Note, it features a cop who's trying to destroy or undermine the system from inside. I watched 3 seasons of this anime, and I kept asking myself, telling myself, maybe they'll do it in this season. Maybe, just maybe, they'll destroy the system. Spoilers, they haven't destroyed the system. I don't know, having the cops challenge and question the system is all fine and dandy, but changing it by working from the inside is a giant ass myth. And this also goes for My Hero Academia too. Villains are needed to challenge the systems that oppress them. Talking about villains or bad guys or criminals or whatever people who fight the system are called, there are 2 guys who actually challenge the system. 2 guys. Unlike the writings of George L. Jackson and other black revolutionaries who emphasize that the oppressive, fascist systems of justice will be brought to their knees by the masses and by the oppressed. In Psycho Pass, the masses behave like mindless puppets who just mindlessly obey the system and live their lives on a loop. The mastermind criminals never taps into the oppression of the people, and rather, kinda like Death Note, the emphasis of the resistance is placed on one specific dude. Season 3 changes things a bit with the focus on immigrants, real estate investors, and the corruption of the police. But yeah, it's not perfect. It could have been much, much better. My advice to all of you is don't go searching for deep messages in anime about cops. You'll be disappointed. There are exceptions, of course, like Watchmen 2019, a show that gets into the white supremacy of the police. It even goes to the lengths of unmasking a cop as a member of the KKK. It does a lot more, but it is tangibly connected to the criminalization of blackness in America. Or One Piece, an anime that has Monkey D. Luffy going around punching the shit out of cops and their fascist-like justice. Or if My Hero Academia was written like this. And this might sound so cliche, but trust me, I can fix My Hero Academia. The first thing the story needs to do is keep Midoriya as this naive, quirkless, innocent, hero-worshipping nerd.
巨大化か。
人気も出そうだしすごい個性でもあるけど、それに伴う街への被害も考えると割と限定的な活用になっていくか。いや、大きさは自在か、それか。
おいおい、メモってヒーロー志望かよ。いいね、頑張れよ。
はい、頑張ります。
The second thing the story needs to do is tease early on that behind the heroes is a racist, cruel system. This needs to be teased early so that the heteromorph arc is written with depth and care, and it's not like a 5-chapter arc about how oppressed people just need to shut up and never express their anger because it would set their rights back by 30 years. And the third thing the story needs to do is cement in maybe the first 30 chapters that the villains are not blabbering fools who just want to destroy the system or the world or the society that oppresses them, but they have a tangible plan, a plan that is connected to their trauma. The manga would also have an emphasis on education, where the principles of the system are drilled into these young future heroes. The teachings of the system would be propaganda that is believable, and some students really buy into it. Like, I want to see a conflict where Midoriya catches a classmate applying the system's racist teachings. Or, it doesn't even need to be racism at this point. It could be ableism, where a student casts judgment on a villain who is suffering from their quirk. I'd want to make Midoriya clash with things that challenge his naive belief of what heroes do. I'd want the villains to question Midoriya and why he follows the teachings of the hero's code of justice without any question. I'd want to keep challenging and making Midoriya question things until we hit 2 points in the story. The first is the heteromorph arc, where you have a villain leading an uprising in reaction to a murder. The murder could be a KKK-like mob, or it could be the most dubious hero, Hawks. I'd want this arc to shatter Midoriya's trust a bit and question what exactly he's been taught. This could also be where Midoriya actually begins to investigate the Hero Association, which leads him to discover one of its biggest secrets. The second big point of the story would be the revelation that All Might, that God, is actually an agent of My Hero Academia's version of the CIA.
何が平和の象徴。所詮抑圧のための暴力装置だお前は。
And I'd want to absolutely wreck All Might's image here and show what kind of a monster the system created to repress any threat to the utopian status quo. Once the smiling hero facade is ripped, All Might will be like an anime version of Homelander or Omni-Man, or an extremely loyal, bootlicking Captain America. We discover here most of his secrets, why his profile and history are so obscure, the true dark meaning of All Might's philosophy of the symbol of peace.
Peacemaker. What a joke.
And it could be teased that All Might is still working for something. He's still doing this for something. He's not the final big bad or the final villain. You might say at this point, hey Lost, that doesn't work. Why would All Might, the true villain of the series, pass down one for all? Well, dear viewer, All Might here would have passed down his quirk to raise Deku as the next symbol of peace, as a person who's completely loyal to the hero system, and Midoriya is the perfect candidate. Dude worships heroes. He worships All Might like a god. Once all that is revealed, we get a fight, or it's all revealed during the fight. Midoriya's justice then clashes with All Might's justice, and Midoriya almost dies. For the finale, it would be fun if first Midoriya is saved by the villains, who help him recruit UA students to join the revolution. Then you have everyone versus All Might, and the heroes who are loyal to the system and want to maintain the status quo. You could have some good callbacks in these final fights, like Midoriya and Bakugo teaming up with Tomura to fight All Might.
不安な時こそ笑っちまって臨むんだ。
どいてください、オールマイト。
The entire Endeavor family teaming up to beat the shit out of their abusive eugenics cop dad. Twice in this version lives. Magne lives. And thus My Hero Academia would become My Revolution Academia. An anime that forges a revolutionary consciousness into the youth, and how systems that oppress us can be torn down. How people have the power to grasp a seemingly lost future and fight for a better, brighter, and happier future. But that's never gonna happen. That's why this part is called The Lost Futures of My Hero Academia. It's a lost future. My Hero Academia would never end with such a badass political message. It probably ends with something like, anyone can be a cop. I mean, a hero. My version of My Hero Academia probably sucks. It took me 5 days to think of it, so please, tell me how you would have written My Hero Academia better. We live in a world that is continuously trying to normalize police violence. From the media's attempt to manufacture content, be it the news that reported college students protesting a genocide were violent and threatening, while simultaneously reporting that the state had every right to brutally and violently use the police to oppress students who refused and will continue to refuse the normalization of a genocide. To any Marvel movie that portrays its heroes as protectors of the status quo, to the creation and implementation of laws and policies, be it the 1876 Indian Act in Canada, or the 1994 Crime Bill in America, or the 2001 Patriots Act, or whatever the fuck the racist Britons call their immigration bill, or the apartheid genocidal state of Israel, who has a 76-long-year record of passing racist and apartheid laws. However, most of these laws or bills are just words, right? It gets freaky when they are enforced by the police. The physical brutality of police beating college students protesting a genocide. The violence needed to keep and maintain a status quo. The amount of black bodies thrown into prison because of Bill fucking Clinton. The physical building of mega prisons. The physical building of cop cities. The realities of Muslim and South Asians being thrown into prisons, while the USA secretly and covertly deported them by using the Patriots Act. The so shocking revelation that the fascist rhetoric Britain has been spewing for years has emboldened English Nazis to riot and terrorize people of color in the UK. This list can go on and on and on, but if you really want to talk about police brutality, carceral states, and state surveillance, there's occupied Palestine. There's the fact that since 1948, Israel has locked up tens of thousands of Palestinians, where they are tortured and let to rot in prisons. And I'm not just talking about Palestinian resistance fighters, but the children, the women, and old people who were kidnapped by the IDF. Israel has also full access to the great techs the USA and the UK invents, and uses occupied Palestine as a testing ground in a continued genocide. One example being the AI and drones, which are used to massacre Palestinians. The struggles of the oppressed are connected. They are linked. And maybe it isn't fair to bash My Hero Academia for its propaganda, when in reality there are worse examples. But watching this show normalize cops and authority has angered me. It made me think about how My Hero Academia fans view the world. Do you see people resisting their oppression as villains? Do you think the people who are fighting the systems that oppress them as deranged people, as children, as people who should just let the grown-ups handle things? Has this anime actually impacted people politically, or are fans just watching or reading to see how Midoriya becomes the greatest hero?
How? 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 I don't know. I don't know.
If you've made it this far, yes, you've just watched a video about a silly anime about cop-like heroes. I made this video so that you leave with a better understanding on how Copaganda can hide in media. I want you to leave with a better understanding on justice, repression, prisons, and why it's necessary to organize and resist and not just vote. And hope that your next government will reform the system.
Nonsense!
I want you to leave carrying the legacy of George L. Jackson, of Huey P. Newton, Malcolm X, Frantz Fanon, and Simone Brown. This video wouldn't have been made without their words and their voices, and so I aim to honor them, not by making a silly video on anime, but with my own actions, and what I aim to teach people. When reading George Jackson, a man who was deeply affected by Fanon, I came to see how cynical people can be when it comes to the status quo and the systems that oppress us. George Jackson, with every fiber of his being, rejected doomerism and fought bravely in prison until he was assassinated, even in a dark cell, destined for death. Jackson wrote and believed that the future wasn't lost. His hopes were tethered to people who will one day destroy the systems that oppress them and attain liberation. Hey, hi, welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do. Like this video if you liked it, or dislike it, and leave an angry comment, because I do read all of the comments. I read all of the angry, mean, hurtful comments. You know, I just sit in my room and take each and every single comment to heart. Like I'm not kidding, I'm not joking, I'm not trying to throw shade on those who comment on my videos, you know, and are mean to me. I actually do that. I sit and I study each and every single comment, and I say to myself, how can I be better, man? How can I do better? How can I make it up for this dude who's really mad at me? And if Horokoshi is watching, hey dude, I'm sorry if I butchered your name and trashed your manga, but congratulations on finishing it. I bet it feels really great to be done, and I don't know, I hope you recover and rest. I know you've been kind of like suffering for the past few years. Before you go, check out the videos and causes linked below. You have an Anansi's Library video that covers George Jackson in more depth. Overthrow Media has videos on prison abolition and the dehumanization of prisoners. You have That Dang Dad, the guy that allowed me to use, I don't know, like 10 seconds for the part 1 title, the Thin Blue Line. That's all him. And so yeah, we got some videos about the Thin Blue Line linked below. And finally, there's a GoFundMe to bring justice for Mathayo Arcangelo, a man from the Sudani community of Edmonton who was recently executed by the Edmonton police after raising his hands. So I urge you to go watch Turb's video and act, because this needs to fucking stop. White police officers and their racist systems must be held accountable for the many deaths and executions of innocent black men across the United States and Canada. Yeah, so I'm counting on all of you who made it this far into the video. And I'm gonna leave you with that really sad and horrifying kind of note. I hope you all take care, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.